Cockpit Confessionals, Part 2.
Turn down for what?
Coming up. Hey 7-4 crew, welcome back. If you don't know me, my name's Kelsey. I'm a 747 pilot. My channel 7-4 Gear is all about aviation. Today I'm here in Charleston, South Carolina. If you remember, the hotel that we stay at in Charleston faces a pool and there's a bunch of people out there, so I can't show you the view from my hotel, but that's where I'm at. Hopefully you've already seen Cockpit Confessionals number 1, and if you haven't, this is definitely not a video that you want to see and watch with your kids. Most of my videos are very family friendly. This involves nudity, people going to jail, things like that, so probably not the best thing to watch with your family. Also, I don't know, nor have I ever participated in any of these stories, even though I sometimes tell them in first person because I think it makes the video better. I am not involved in any of these stories.
Sound like some bullshit to me.
Let's get into it. If you have a story of something you did with your crew that got out of hand, send it to my Instagram, @74gear, which is coincidentally why this first story happened. One of my most liked and shared pictures from last year was a picture of this Lambo that we were transporting. Unfortunately, most pilots are never going to make enough money to afford a brand new Lambo like this. Well, at least not on your typical pilot salary only. But that didn't stop this guy. During this short flight, it was just a captain and a first officer, and in the middle of the flight, the captain told the first officer he was going to jump up and stretch his legs, which is totally normal. A lot of times in the middle of the flight, we'll jump up and grab some food or go to the bathroom or things like that. So after about 10 minutes passed, the first officer started to get worried because the captain hadn't came back yet. So he started ringing the seatbelt sign, he started yelling, he made an announcement, which is the public announcement system that goes through the whole airplane. He started making all these different things trying to reach the captain and tell him to come back up. After the captain didn't respond, he started to get a bit nervous. He started to worry that in this case, maybe the captain had fallen and hurt himself or was having a heart attack or he didn't know what. So what he decided to do was leave the plane on autopilot and run back and see if he could find the captain. Now, as you can imagine, this is not something we're ever supposed to do, of leaving the plane without anybody up there. But he started thinking, well, if this captain is dying or having a heart attack, I need to help and find out what's going on so I can help save his life. If you've seen some of the Instagram stories that I do, you know that the forward part of a freighter usually doesn't have a lot of space. So it's pretty quick. You can check the galley, check the rest area, check the bathroom and a few seats. It won't take but a couple seconds to check all those things. But he ran and checked all of those, and he couldn't find the captain. So after checking all those spots, there was really only two options. Either one, the captain was in the cargo area of the aircraft, or two, he disappeared like that Nicolas Cage film, Left Behind. The first officer making this decision to go back and do this is really a risky move. If he goes back there and there's an emergency or something happens, there's nobody that controls. And so he's, in a way, risking his job and his life by doing this. As you can imagine, this is 100% a no-no situation to do, but he made the decision in the best interest of safety, which is our number one priority, was to find the captain and find out what was going on.
What the fuck is going on?
So he decides to run back into the cargo area and see if he can find the captain. As he starts running through there, he ends up getting to the Ferrari and finding the captain stuck inside the Ferrari. What had happened was the captain thought it would be a great idea to go get some selfies in this Ferrari while they were in cruise, which, as you can imagine, is not something that we're supposed to ever do. And there was some safety feature on this Ferrari that basically allowed the door to open, but as soon as it closed, he could not open it again because it locked. It worked on some type of a proximity sensor with the key card, and the key card was on the ground at the destination. The captain then instructs the FO to run back to the front of the plane, get into the flight deck, and fly and land the plane. As you can imagine, this is also a big no-no. It's obviously meant to have two pilots in there, so the first officer is now having to fly, work the radios, and do everything. I don't think he declared an emergency or anything. I think he just tried to play it off cool, flew in, landed the plane, and taxied into the gate. Once they got into the gate, then the ground handlers had to actually come up there with the key in order to unlock the door so the captain could get out of the Ferrari. As the story goes, the captain ended up getting fired from this, so obviously not worth it, but sometimes you just gotta do it for the gram. Something that most people don't know is that flight attendants generally don't make a lot of money. I remember asking a friend of mine, how much do you think a flight attendant makes? And she told me, I don't know, they probably make $80,000, $90,000 a year. And while most flight attendants can end up making that much later on in their career, it's definitely not what they make when they are early starting off. So it makes sense that this flight attendant decided to start a side hustle. It's important to understand in a lot of airlines they split up the flight attendants and the pilots. So you might only do 2 legs with your flight attendants and then go to separate hotels. Often on the layovers, you as a pilot and the flight attendants always don't meet up to go out and do things together, which I personally don't like. I like hanging out with my crew, going out and having fun on layovers. On this layover, they were domestic, and this flight attendant decided to do her side hustle. The pilots ended up going to a different hotel, and I think they had only done 1 leg with this flight attendant, but they had seen everybody and obviously talked to them before the flight, and after the flight, they waited for them to get off the plane, and they went out and jumped in their separate hotel vans. Once the pilots got to their hotel, they decided to go grab some food. They went out, grabbed some food, and right next to where they were eating, or a block or 2 away, was a strip club. And they thought, yeah, let's head out to the strip club, see what's going on. Well, after 30 minutes of being out there on the strip club, the girl that got announced was, let's call her name Tiffany, which it was not her name, but let's say Tiffany gets announced to come on stage. Well, Tiffany gets on stage, and both the pilots look at each other and go, no way. It was one of their flight attendants. Basically what happened is the flight attendant that did this flight, what she would do is look at her schedule, call ahead to the different strip clubs, and before she arrived, she would call and make herself the premier or the special person of that night. I don't really know how it all works, but she had a place to stay, transport in and out, so all she had to do was catch an Uber over there and make a bunch of extra money. Well, when she came around to get her tips, she ended up running into these pilots, and they ended up talking, I guess having a good laugh about it, because I ended up hearing about it. Her story behind it was that she's not doing it in her town, so nobody in her friends or family are going to end up seeing her doing this. And at the end of the day, you know, if she wants to go do that for her, man, gotta make that money.
Turn down for what?
On some of the longer layovers, you know that I've told you of stories of going out with the crew and going out and having drinks or going out and partying. Well, this story was like that, but it went really, really wrong. The crew decided to go out and get some drinks, and sometimes you get young flight attendants who don't know quite what their limits are because, hey, we were all 21 once. Well, this crew went out, they had a late night, and they were down in New Orleans. And so they went out, they had a long night. I think they finished at 3 in the morning, and they weren't flying until 4 in the afternoon, so that was plenty of time. Well, this flight attendant, being new to the drinking world, decided to start mixing a bunch of different drinks together, and everybody knows that is never going to end up well, and that flight attendant ended up being pretty sick at the end of the night. So the crew called it a night, they went back to the hotel, and that was it. Well, the next morning, everybody was fine, except this one flight attendant wasn't feeling super great, but it was just a 1 leg home. And she thought, I can tough it out for 1 leg, not a big deal. If you're going to go out and party, you definitely don't want to do more than 1 leg, especially if you're not feeling really well. Now, I personally don't like to drink more than 1 or 2 drinks when I'm out on a trip because I am such a super baby when it comes to feeling ill. So I might have 1 drink or 2 if I'm on a layover, but I don't like that feeling of feeling hungover. So that's usually the most I'll ever do if I'm about to fly the next day.
He's so lame.
This flight attendant did not have that rule. Now realize that all crews always have the option to call out sick if they don't feel well enough to fly, but she felt that she could tough it out and do that 1 leg home. So everybody boarded the plane, everything was secured up, and she said, hey, we're ready to go. Close up the door, taxi, and get ready for takeoff. As you know, the flight crew and cabin crew have the shoulder harnesses that we wear for takeoff and landing. Now this flight attendant was facing back towards everybody in the cabin, in the front seat of the plane, looking backwards. So when the plane took off, that feeling of getting up in the air made her feel sick. The problem is, because she had her shoulder harnesses on, she couldn't bend over to throw up, which meant she threw up, locked in her seat, all down the front of her dress. Trying to cover her tracks with all the people that were now staring at her, probably feeling sick to themselves, she said, I think I have the flu. If you remember the story from Cockpit Confessionals 1 where I talk about the pilot coming down to pick up the pizza in nothing but his Reeboks,
Ooh, Papa John's.
this story took place in the exact same hotel. I don't know how this flight crew and airline weren't kicked out by this point after that Reebok pizza incident, but what happened is this crew was getting out of the van and they started hearing a bunch of hollering coming from one of the rooms. Now sometimes the flight crews won't go out if it's cold out or we're being cheap. We'll just hang out and buy a bottle of something, hang out in the room and just have some good laughs. I've done it before. It's a lot of fun. It's kind of like a tiny little house party.
You cheap bastard.
Now it's really strange because in most hotel rooms you don't have windows that you can open up or anything like that, and I think that's something about suicide prevention, but every now and again we end up at hotels with big balconies, so I don't understand the rules of when you can have a window that doesn't open up but a balcony that you can walk out to. But anyways, this hotel had this balcony and there was people that were hanging out there. As the crew was getting out, they heard this loud crashing explosion and glass breaking. And then they heard someone screaming like they were at a frat house. One of the pilots decided that he was part of a rock band and decided to rip the TV off of the wall and throw it off of the balcony. After that story, they were definitely kicked out of that hotel. Finally, this last embarrassing story involves strip clubs, strippers, and going to jail, and the best first officer you could ever ask for.
It wasn't me.
I know that I have a lot of these crazy stories of pilots and strippers and strip clubs. I just want to let you know that is not the norm, but you know, these are the crazy stories that you hear when you're out flying around, so that's why you're hearing them. So these two pilots decided to spend some of their hard-earned money. They went out to the strip club and just started hanging out and having some drinks. Well, one of these pilots is known for being a heavy partier. About 1 a.m., the first pilot said, "Hey man, I'm done, I'm ready to go home."
Incredibly lame.
He left, went back to the hotel, and called it a night. Well, about 10 a.m. the next morning, his phone kept ringing, and he was going, "I don't know who this is," and he didn't want to pick up the phone. It was the captain. The captain was in jail. He said, "Bro, I need you to come and get me out of jail because our flight's at 3 and I need to make the flight." The first officer, having the best crew resource management I've ever heard of, decided to jump in an Uber, run down there, go to the ATM and withdraw enough money to cover the bail. After he bailed the captain out, they ran back, grabbed their flight, and flew out of the country. Because all this happened outside of the US. Once they got up in the flight, the first officer was like, "Bro, what happened last night?" The captain thought he developed this connection with one of the strippers. He was spending a lot of money and she was standing there talking to him, so he ended up getting her number and thinking, "Oh, we have this great connection."
What an idiot!
Then what happened after the strip club closed, he decided he would hang outside of the strip club for her to leave so he could talk to her more. Now, I don't know the rules of strip clubs, but I'm pretty sure that violates all of them. This stripper ended up walking home and the pilot kept talking to her and nagging her. Eventually she started to get very irritated because he was drunk and who knows what he was asking for, but she started to get really upset and said, "If you don't leave me alone, I'm going to call the cops." Well, as you can imagine, he did not leave her alone. She ended up calling the cops. The cops came and picked him up and threw him in jail.
Bad boy.
Hey,
what she gonna do? No! Don't do that. Never.
Now I'm told that after this incident, the pilot is not allowed to fly back to that country anymore. So I think the airline at first didn't find out, and then they put something on his schedule having him fly back to that country, and he said, no, I can't go back there anymore. I don't know that that's true, but that makes sense to me. Being stuck in a foreign jail by yourself with no one to help you would feel a lot like being stuck on an island all by yourself. If you haven't seen the Hollywood vs. reality I did on Castaway, starring Tom Hanks, I'll put a link to it right here. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.